the hills of Wales, where the wild winds blow, live the crazy Celts from long ago. With woad on their cheeks and lime in their hair, they danced with the druids and wrestled a bear. Our crazy Celts, loud and proud, painted blue and shouting loud. Roundhouse rebels, sheep in tow, history's wildest, now let's go.
You know what they don't tell you when you sign up to be an archaeologist? That you'll spend half your life knee-deep in sheep poo, arguing with brambles, and trying to explain to a confused farmer why you're measuring his ditch with a laser. I'm Dr. Rhys Morgan, born and raised in Cardiff, and I've spent the last decade crawling across the Welsh countryside in search of one thing: Hillforts. Not castles, not caves, not ancient vending machines, although I did once find a suspiciously coin-shaped pebble. I'm talking about Celtic hillforts, massive earthworks built by Iron Age tribes, perched on high ground like muddy crowns. They weren't just homes, they were statements, big, bold, and built to say, this land is ours, also don't steal our goats. Now the Celts didn't build these things randomly. They picked their spots like pros. High ridges, coastal cliffs, forest edges, anywhere with a good view and a bad attitude. One of the most impressive sites I've worked on is near modern-day Holyhead. Back then, it was a bustling stronghold, full of roundhouses, warriors, and the constant sound of someone yelling about turnips. The layout was clever. You had deep ditches dug around the perimeter, then massive banks of earth piled up to form ramparts. On top of those, wooden palisades, spiky fences designed to keep out enemies, wild animals, and nosy neighbors. I once tried climbing one during a survey, slipped, landed in a bramble bush, and discovered a 2,000-year-old pig jaw. Glamorous. Inside the Hillforts, life was busy. Families lived in roundhouses, big circular huts with thatched roofs and a central fire. Cozy, smoky, and perfect for burning your eyebrows off while cooking porridge. Kids ran around with wooden swords, traders swapped pots and pigs, and druids muttered to trees. I found a carved stone near what we now call Brecon that might have been a druid's seat or a very uncomfortable toilet. Still debating. We've uncovered pottery, iron tools, jewelry, and one mysterious object that looks like a spoon but smells like regret. My assistant thinks it's a musical instrument. I think it's a failed invention called the Celtic nose flute. Either way, it's going in the museum. What were they thinking? Section. But Hillforts weren't just practical, they were symbolic. Building one took serious effort. You needed manpower, planning, and a lot of shouting. It was a way of saying, we're here, we're strong, and we've got better ditches than you. Some Hillforts were used for centuries, passed down through generations like muddy heirlooms. Others were abandoned, left to the sheep and the stories. And the stories are everywhere. Local legends talk about warriors who vanished into the mist, treasure buried beneath the ramparts, and ghosts who still guard the gates. I've never seen a ghost, but I did once get chased by a very angry badger. Close enough. One of the most fascinating things is how these Hillforts connect us to the landscape. They weren't just plonked down anywhere. They were part of the terrain, shaped by it, and shaping it in return. When you stand on top of one, looking out over the valleys and hills, you feel it. The history, the presence, the echo of footsteps and war cries and someone yelling, "Who stole my cloak?" We've mapped dozens of sites across Wales, from the north coast to the southern valleys. Some are massive, with multiple rings of defences. Others are small, tucked into hillsides like forgotten secrets. Each one tells a story of community, conflict, and the Celtic way of life. And it's not just about the past. These sites are part of our heritage. They remind us where we come from. They connect us to the people who lived, loved, and occasionally tripped over molehills thousands of years ago. They're muddy, mysterious, and magnificent. You'd think after a few years of digging up Hillforts I'd get used to the mud. But no, every site has its own special flavour of soggy. Some are squelchy, some are slippy. One near modern-day Carmarthen was so sticky I lost a boot and had to finish the survey in one sock and a bin bag. The sheep were not impressed. But that's the thing about these places, they're alive. Not literally, of course. Although I did once fall into a rabbit hole and come face to face with something that looked suspiciously like a druid's wig. But metaphorically, they're buzzing. Every layer of soil tells a story. Every post hole, every burnt patch, every broken pot is a whisper from the past. Let's talk construction. Building a Hillfort wasn't a weekend DIY project. You needed a whole community. First, you'd clear the site, trees, rocks, anything in the way. Then came the ditches. Deep, wide, and dug with nothing but wooden spades and sheer determination. The earth from the ditch was piled up to form a bank, which was then topped with a wooden palisade. Some Hillforts had 2 or even 3 rings of defences. That's not just security, that's showing off. Inside the fort, you'd find roundhouses arranged in clusters. Some were homes, Others were workshops, storage huts, or meeting spaces. The floors were packed earth, sometimes covered with rushes or animal skins. The walls were made of wattle and daub, woven sticks plastered with a mix of mud, straw, and dung. Yes, dung. It was the Iron Age version of wallpaper. Smelly, but surprisingly effective. The roof was thatched with straw or reeds, sloping down to keep the rain out and the smoke in. There was a central hearth for cooking and heating, and a hole in the roof to let the smoke escape. In theory. In practice, it mostly escaped into your lungs. I've sat in reconstructed roundhouses during experimental archaeology sessions, and let me tell you, after 10 minutes your eyes water, your throat burns, and your hair smells like smoked bacon for a week. But it worked. These homes were warm, dry, and built to last. Some hillforts show evidence of continuous occupation for centuries. That's generations of families living, working, and arguing over who forgot to feed the pigs. Speaking of pigs, animals were a big part of Hillfort life. Cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs were kept in pens or allowed to roam within the fort. They provided meat, milk, wool, and the occasional surprise when they wandered into your roundhouse and ate your breakfast. I once found a pig tooth embedded in a clay floor. Either it was dropped during dinner, or someone had a very aggressive pet. We've also found quern stones, used for grinding grain into flour. These were heavy, circular stones with a hole in the middle and a handle for turning. It was hard work, usually done by hand, and often by the younger members of the tribe. I tried it once during a school outreach event. After 5 minutes I had blisters, flour in my eyebrows, and a new respect for Iron Age bakers. And then there's the rubbish. Ancient rubbish is an archaeologist's dream. Broken pots, animal bones, burnt seeds, even old poo. It all tells us what people ate. How they cooked, what they wore, and how they lived. One midden, that's a fancy word for a rubbish heap, near modern-day Landelo contained oyster shells, deer antlers, and a bronze brooch shaped like a duck. Either they had very fancy taste, or someone threw a party and lost their jewelry in the soup. But hillforts weren't just about survival. They were about identity, belonging, power. When you stood on the ramparts looking out over your territory, you weren't just seeing fields and forests. You were seeing your world, your people, your past and your future. Some hillforts were clearly defensive, built in strategic locations, with thick walls and narrow entrances designed to funnel attackers into tight spaces. Others seem more ceremonial, with wide open spaces and signs of feasting, gathering, and ritual. We found animal bones arranged in patterns, pits filled with offerings, and even human remains buried in strange positions. One skeleton was found curled up in a ditch, clutching a pot and wearing a necklace. Was it a burial, a sacrifice? A really bad night out, we may never know. And then there's the mystery of the entrances. Many hillforts had elaborate gateways, stone-lined passages, guard chambers, even wooden towers. These weren't just practical, they were theatrical. Imagine arriving at a hillfort for a tribal meeting or a festival. You'd walk up the hill, pass through a narrow gate flanked by carvings and banners, and enter space buzzing with life. Music, laughter, the smell of roasting meat and damp wool. It must have been electric. We've even found evidence of trade: pottery from the continent, glass beads from far-off lands, metalwork that suggests contact with other tribes across Britain and beyond. These weren't isolated hillbillies. They were connected, curious, and clever. And yet, for all their strength, hillforts weren't invincible. When the Romans arrived, they brought new tactics, new weapons, and a very different idea of what a settlement should look like. Stone buildings, straight roads, central heating. The hillforts were gradually abandoned, repurposed, or left to crumble. But their legacy remained in the landscape, in the legends, and in the layers of soil that we archaeologists still dig through today. I've spent years studying these sites, and I'm still amazed by what we find. A child's toy carved from bone, a warrior's sword buried beneath a hearth, a footprint preserved in clay. Each discovery is a glimpse into a world that was muddy, messy, and magnificent. And the best part, we're still finding new ones. Every year, new surveys, drone footage, and LiDAR scans reveal hidden hillforts beneath forests, fields, and even car parks. Wales is full of them, hundreds of sites, each with its own story, waiting to be uncovered. One of the things that fascinates me most about hillforts is how they weren't just military bases or muddy villages. They were living, breathing communities. And like any community, they had structure. Not the kind with spreadsheets and council meetings, mind you. More like, who's got the biggest cloak and the loudest voice? That person was probably in charge. Leadership in Celtic tribes was often based on strength, wisdom, and how many cows you owned. If you could lead warriors into battle, settle disputes, and throw a decent feast, you were chieftain material. Some hillforts had clear signs of elite areas, larger roundhouses, better pottery, and fewer goat footprints on the floor. That's how you know someone was important. Their house didn't smell like livestock. But it wasn't all top-down. These communities worked together. You had farmers, warriors, craftspeople, druids, and the occasional bard who thought rhyming about turnips was a full-time job. Everyone had a role. Everyone contributed, and if you didn't pull your weight, well, let's just say you'd be on dung duty until further notice. Daily life followed the rhythm of the seasons. Spring was for planting, summer for tending, autumn for harvesting, and winter for surviving. Hillforts were often busiest in the warmer months, repairing defenses, trading goods, hosting festivals. In winter, things slowed down. Fires burned low, cloaks got thicker, and stories got longer. I've sat in reconstructed roundhouses during winter solstice events, listening to tales of giants, gods, and magical cows. It's like Netflix, but with more smoke and fewer subtitles. Speaking of festivals, the Celts loved a good celebration. Hillforts were perfect for gatherings, plenty of space, natural acoustics, and the occasional flat bit for dancing. We found evidence of feasting, animal bones with butchery marks, broken pots, and burnt patches that suggest big fires. One site near modern-day Newport had a midden so full of pig bones, we nicknamed it Bacon Hill. I still dream about it. These festivals weren't just parties, they were spiritual events tied to the Celtic calendar. Samhain, Imbolc, Beltane, Lugnasad, each marked a turning point in the year. Druids would lead rituals, light fires, and probably say things like, "The moon is in the seventh sheep," or whatever passed for astrology back then. We found pits filled with offerings, charred grain, animal bones, even broken weapons. Sacrifices to the gods, maybe, or just someone getting carried away with the barbecue. Religion was woven into every part of Hillfort life. The Celts didn't have temples like the Romans. Nature was their cathedral. Trees, rivers, stones, they were all sacred. A spring near a Hillfort might be a healing site. A grove of oaks might be where the Druids held ceremonies. I once found a carved stone buried near a Hillfort entrance. It had spiral patterns and what looked like a face. Could have been a god. Could have been a very bored teenager with a chisel. And then there's the burial sites. Some Hillforts have cemeteries nearby. Others don't. We're still trying to figure out why. Maybe some people were buried in special places, hilltops, caves, rivers. Maybe others were cremated. Maybe some were left out for the birds, like in sky burials. Or maybe they just didn't want archaeologists poking around 2,000 years later. Fair enough. One of the most moving discoveries I've made was a child's grave near a Hillfort in the south. The body was curled up, wrapped in a cloak, with a tiny bronze brooch and a toy carved from bone. It was a reminder that these were real people. Not just warriors and druids, but families, children, lives lived in mud and firelight. And yet, for all the hardship, there was joy. We find musical instruments, pipes, rattles, even drums. We find games, carved dice, patterned stones. We find art, swirling designs on metal, pottery, and bone. These people weren't just surviving. They were creating, celebrating, laughing, probably at someone who fell in the ditch again. I've spent hours walking the ramparts of these Hillforts, imagining the sounds of life echoing through the air. The clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the chatter of traders, the laughter of children, the low hum of a druid chanting something mysterious and probably slightly made up. It's all there, just beneath the surface. And the more we dig, the more we learn. Every Hillfort is a puzzle. Some are simple, one ring, a few houses, a clear entrance. Others are complex, multiple layers, hidden chambers, strange alignments with the sun or stars. One site near modern-day Wrexham has entrances that line up perfectly with the midsummer sunrise. Coincidence? Maybe, but the Celts were clever. They watched the sky. They read the land. They knew things we're only just beginning to understand. We use all sorts of tools to study these sites now. Drones, LiDAR, geophysics. We can see beneath the ground without digging a single hole. It's like having X-ray vision, but for mud. And every scan reveals more. Hidden ditches, lost roundhouses, forgotten roads. Wales is full of secrets, and Hillforts are the key. I've got notebooks full of sketches, maps, and theories. Some make sense, some are wild guesses. One includes a drawing of a sheep wearing a crown. I don't remember why, probably a late night in the lab, but that's the beauty of archaeology. It's part science, part storytelling, and part sheer stubbornness. You dig, you document, you argue with your colleagues about whether a lump of burnt clay is a hearth or a really bad pancake. And sometimes, just sometimes, you find something that makes your heart stop. A bead, a blade, a footprint, a moment frozen in time. And you realize that Hillforts aren't just ruins. They're echoes of people who lived, loved, fought, and feasted. People who built their homes on high ground, not just for defense but for pride, for presence, for the view. Now let's talk about what happened when things got messy, when the neighbors weren't just popping round to borrow a pot, but turning up with spears and bad intentions. Because for all their community spirit and seasonal feasting, Hillforts were also built for war. You don't dig a ditch the size of a swimming pool and top it with a spiky fence just to keep the cows in. You do it because you're expecting trouble. And in Iron Age Wales, trouble came in many forms: rival tribes, raiders, and eventually, the Romans. Defending a Hillfort was all about preparation. The entrances were narrow and twisty, designed to slow attackers down and funnel them into tight spaces where they could be picked off one by one. Some Hillforts had overlapping banks and ditches, forcing enemies to zigzag uphill while defenders rained down rocks, spears, and very rude words. We found sling stones, smooth, round pebbles, perfect for flinging at someone's helmet. Some were even carved with little symbols, like a prehistoric signature. This rock brought to you by Owen the slightly unstable. I've tried slinging one myself during a reenactment. Missed the target, hit a sandwich. Still counts. Shields were round, wooden, and often decorated with swirling patterns. Not just for show, they were light, strong, and perfect for bashing someone in the shins. Swords were short and broad, ideal for close combat. Spears were more common, easier to make, easier to throw, and excellent for poking people who got too close to your roundhouse. And then there were the warriors themselves. Painted, howling, hair spiked with lime, cloaks flapping in the wind. Imagine facing a wall of that, charging down a hill, yelling in a language you don't understand. No wonder the Romans built walls. But it wasn't just brute force. There was strategy, ambushes in forests, surprise attacks at dawn, feigned retreats to lure enemies into traps. One Hillfort near modern-day Llandrindod, Welsh shows signs of a sudden, violent attack, burnt layers, smashed pottery, and a collapsed gate. Whether it was a rival tribe or a Roman assault, we'll never know, but something big went down, and it wasn't a barbecue. Sieges were rare but brutal. Hillforts weren't designed for long-term defense. If you ran out of food or water, you were in trouble. Some sites show signs of hasty repairs, extra ditches, makeshift barricades, even hidden escape routes. One fort had a tunnel leading out through the hillside. I crawled through it once, found a fox, a broken pot, and a very old sandwich, possibly mine. But even in war there was ritual. Warriors carried charms, carved stones, animal teeth, bits of bone, some war talks, thick metal neck rings that marked them as elite. We found them buried with their owners or hidden in pits as offerings. One talk was made of twisted gold, so finely crafted it must have taken weeks. I wore a replica once, felt powerful. Then it got stuck and I had to be rescued by a museum intern with butter. And when a warrior fell, they were honored, buried with weapons, cloaks, and sometimes feasting gear. One grave near modern-day Bangor held a man with a sword, a shield, and a drinking horn. Either he was a hero, or he really liked parties. But warfare wasn't constant. Most of the time, hillforts were peaceful, places of trade, family, and storytelling. The defenses were there just in case, like locking your door at night, not because you expect trouble, but because you want to be ready if it comes. Still, the threat was real, and when the Romans arrived, everything changed. They didn't just attack, they occupied, built forts of their own. Straight roads, stone walls, tiled roofs. They brought new weapons, new tactics, and a very different idea of what a settlement should be. Some hillforts resisted, others adapted, some were abandoned, but the memory of them lingered in the land, in the legends, and in the layers of soil we still dig through today. I've stood on the ramparts of a hillfort at dawn, mist curling through the valleys, and imagined what it must have felt like. The tension, the pride, the knowledge that this was your home, your tribe, your hill, and that you'd fight to keep it. Even after the Romans marched in with their straight roads, stone forts, and suspiciously clean sandals, the hillforts didn't vanish. Some were abandoned, yes. Others were repurposed, used as lookouts, livestock pens, or even Roman outposts. But many simply faded into the hills, their ditches softened by time, their ramparts swallowed by bracken and sheep. And yet, they never really disappeared. You see, the Celts didn't leave behind written records. No scrolls, no books, no how to build a hillfort in 10 easy steps. But they left stories, and those stories stuck, passed down through generations, whispered by firelight, woven into the very names of the land. Take any hillfort in Wales and ask the locals. Chances are there's a legend, a sleeping warrior beneath the hill, a hidden treasure guarded by a ghostly hound, a druid who turned into a tree and still watches over the valley. I once visited a site near modern-day Machynlleth where the locals swore the hill hummed at night. I camped there. It did hum, turned out there. It did hum, turned out to be a cow with sinus issues, still to be a cow with sinus issues, still spooky. These stories spooky. These stories matter. They're echoes of memory, fragments of a time, echoes of memory, fragments of a time when the hillfort wasn't just a bump, when the hillfort wasn't just a bump in the landscape, but the heart of in the landscape, but the heart of a community. And a community. And they've helped archaeologists like me find sites that don't appear on maps. A farmer's tale about a gee maps. A farmer's tale about a giant's ring, or a fairy fort cannon's ring, or a fairy fort can lead to a discovery. I once followed a rumor about a cursed field, and a rumor about a cursed field, and found the faint outline of a triple-ditched enclosure. No curses, just a very grumpy badger. But it's not just folklore. Hill found the faint outline of a triple-ditched enclosure. No curses, just a very grumpy badger. But it's not just folklore. Hillforts have shaped the way we see the land. Look at a forts have shaped the way we see the land. Look at a map of Wales and you'll notice something. The high places, the ridges, the map of Wales and you'll notice something. The high places, the ridges, the promontories, they're dotted with names like Caer and Cassel. These aren't just poetic flourishes. They're clues. Markers of ancient power are clues. Markers of ancient power. And when you stand on one, even today you feel it. The wind changes, the view stretches, the past presses, wind changes, the view stretches, the past presses in. I've taken school groups up to these sites, kids from Cardiff, Newport, Bangor. Some have never been on a hill before, Newport, Bangor. Some have never been on a hill before, but once they're up there something clicks, they run. They run along the ramparts, ask questions, imagine battles. One lad stood on along the ramparts, asked questions, imagine battles. One lad stood on a bank, raised a stick like a sword and shouted, I am the king of the fort. His mate threw a sandwich at him, history in action. And that's the thing, threw a sandwich at him, history in action. And that's the thing, these places aren't just for archaeologists with muddy boots and notebooks full of doodles. They belong to all of us. They're part of our story, our identity, our landscape. In recent years, there's been a surge of interest in Celtic heritage. People want to know where they come from, what their ancestors. They belong to all of us. They're part of our story, our identity, our landscape. In recent years, there's been a surge of interest in Celtic heritage. People want to know where they come from, what their ancestors believed, how they lived, fought, feasted, and farmed. And Hillforts are the perfect gateway. They're visible, believed. How they lived, fought, feasted, and farmed. And Hillforts are the perfect gateway. They're visible, tangible. You can walk their paths, touch their stones, imagine the smoke, tangible. You can walk their paths, touch their stones, imagine the smoke rising from roundhouse roofs. We've started using house roofs. We've started using new technology to bring them to life, 3D reconstructions, virtual reality tour, even augmented reality apps that let you point your phone at a hill, and see the fort as it once was. I helped design and see the fort as it once was. I helped design one for a site near modern-day Aberg, one for a site near modern-day Abergavenny. You stand on the ridge, hold up your phone, and suddenly you're surrounded by roundhouses, warriors up your phone, and suddenly you're surrounded by roundhouses, warriors, and a very confused goat. It's magic. But even without a very confused goat, it's magic. But even without the tech, the magic's still there. I've stood on Hillforts at sunrise, the mist curling through the valleys, and felt the weight of centuries. I've watched the sun set behind ramparts built by hands long gone. I've stood on Hillforts at sunrise, the mist curling through the valleys, and felt the weight of centuries. I've watched the sun set behind ramparts built by hands long gone. I've listened to the wind whistle through ditches dug with wooden spades, and listened to the wind whistle through ditches dug with wooden spades, and sheer determination. And I've realized something, these places aren't ruins. They're reminders of resilience, of community, of the people who came. Of the people who came before us and shaped the land we walk today. So next time you see a lumpy hill, a strange ditch, or a sheep standing suspiciously still, take a closer look. You might be standing on a hillfort. You might be standingly still, take a closer look. You might be standing on a hillfort. You might be standing in history. You might think archaeology is all about old bones and broken pots. And yes, there's a lot of that, but it's also about imagination, curiosity, asking questions no one's asked in 2,000 years. It's about standing on a hill, staring at a ditch and thinking, what happened here? Who stood where I'm standing now? And why is there a sheep chewing my notebook? That's why I love experimental archaeology. It's where we try to recreate the past using the tools, materials, and techniques the Celts had. We've built roundhouses with wattle and daub, fired pottery in open pits, even tried cooking porridge over a hearth using replica Iron Age pots. Spoiler, it sticks. Badly. One time I set fire to my sleeve and accidentally invented smoky elbow stew. Not recommended. But it's in those moments, when the smoke stings your eyes, when the clay cracks, when the wind howls through the ramparts, that the past feels real. Not just something in a book, but something you can touch, smell, and occasionally trip over. And here's the best part. You don't have to wait until you're a grown-up to get involved. If you're listening to this and thinking, that sounds amazing, then guess what? You could be the next archaeologist. You could be the one who finds a lost Hillfort, uncovers a forgotten artifact, or solves a mystery that's been buried for centuries. You could be the one who tells the story of the crazy Celts to the next generation. Start small, visit a local museum, ask questions, read books about ancient Wales, draw your own Hillfort, build one out of cereal boxes and string, go on a walk and look at the land like a detective. Why is that hill so round? Why is that ditch so deep? Why is that sheep staring at me again? Join a young archaeologists club. Volunteer on a dig when you're old enough. Talk to archaeologists. We love talking, especially if there's tea involved, and biscuits, preferably chocolate ones. Because archaeology isn't just about the past. It's about people. It's about stories. It's about connecting what was with what is and what could be. So if you've ever dreamed of discovering treasure, solving ancient puzzles, or spending your days in muddy fields with a trowel in one hand and a sandwich in the other, welcome. You're already one of us. The Hillforts are still out there, waiting, watching, whispering their secrets to the wind. And maybe, just maybe, you'll be the one who listens.